A flight into destiny, a legacy of dreams. Marcus Johnson had always believed in the power of hard work, resilience, and kindness. He was not just another businessman. He was a man who had built his empire with integrity, ensuring that no matter how high he soared, his feet remained firmly planted in the values that shaped him. Growing up in a small neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia, Marcus had seen struggle firsthand. His mother worked double shifts as a nurse, and his father, a mechanic, instilled in him the importance of perseverance. Through sheer determination, Marcus had climbed the ranks of the aviation industry, transforming his passion for travel into a thriving business, Horizon Airways. His airline was more than just a company. It was a testament to his journey, a beacon of hope that proved dreams could take flight with the right mix of dedication and integrity. But despite his monumental success, Marcus never lost sight of his most cherished role, being a father. His 12-year-old daughter, Leila Johnson, was his pride and joy. Ever since her mother had passed away when she was a toddler, Marcus had devoted his life to giving her the best possible upbringing, one filled with love, wisdom, and the same values that had propelled him forward. Leila wasn't just any child. She had an incredible sense of empathy and curiosity, traits that made her unique. She noticed the little things, how people felt, the way they were treated, and the small acts of kindness that often went unnoticed by others. An exciting trip with unexpected twists. One bright Saturday morning, Marcus decided to surprise Leila with a trip to New York City. She had always dreamed of visiting the bustling metropolis, seeing the towering skyscrapers, and experiencing the energy of Times Square. The father-daughter duo arrived at the airport in high spirits, ready for a memorable adventure. As they approached the first-class check-in counter of Horizon Airways, the staff greeted them warmly, completely unaware of Marcus's identity as the airline's owner. He had deliberately chosen not to draw attention to himself, preferring to experience his own airline from a passenger's perspective. They received their boarding passes, passed through security, and made their way to the gate. Leila, carrying her favorite book, eagerly chatted about all the places she wanted to visit in New York. Marcus listened intently, amused by her enthusiasm. As they boarded the plane and settled into their plush first-class seats, Marcus noticed the lead flight attendant, Clara, moving briskly down the aisle. She was an older woman with sharp eyes and a firm posture. Marcus had seen her type before, efficient but lacking warmth. She approached their seats with an expression that lacked the usual warmth associated with first-class service. Before takeoff, as Leila sat engrossed in her book, Clara's stern voice sliced through the air. "Young lady, put that book away. We are preparing for takeoff," she snapped, not bothering to soften her tone. Leila, startled, looked up with wide eyes. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'll put it away now," she said quietly, closing the book. But before she could stow it away herself, Clara reached out and snatched it from her hands, shoving it into the overhead compartment. Marcus's jaw tightened. He had seen rudeness before, but this was something else entirely. Leila wasn't disturbing anyone, and the way Clara had handled the situation was entirely unnecessary. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "That was unnecessary. My daughter was complying with your instructions." Clara crossed her arms and scoffed. "Passengers need to pay attention. Maybe teach your daughter to be more aware." Silence settled between them. Lila's face fell, and Marcus could see the hurt in her eyes. His heart clenched, not because he was the CEO of the airline, but because no child deserved to be treated this way. Marcus could have revealed his identity right then and there. He could have demanded an apology, ordered disciplinary action, or even had Clara removed from the flight. But he chose to observe instead. He wanted to understand why someone within his company, a company he had built on principles of respect, would behave this way. "Understood," he finally said, forcing himself to remain composed. "Let's focus on having a safe and pleasant flight." Leila looked up at him with admiration, recognizing his quiet strength. She took a deep breath, swallowing her emotions. She had always been taught to handle situations with dignity and respect. But this felt different. As the flight continued, Marcus kept a close eye on Clara's behavior with other passengers. He quickly realized that this wasn't a one-time incident. She was short-tempered, dismissive, and lacked patience, especially with elderly passengers or those needing assistance. Marcus's disappointment grew. If one employee was behaving this way, how many others were? How many customers had been mistreated under his watch? Layla's letter. A child's voice with power. Midway through the flight, Marcus noticed Leila pulling out her small notebook and pen. Her brow was furrowed in concentration as she began writing. "What are you writing, sweetheart?" he asked gently. Leila looked up, her eyes filled with determination. "I'm writing a letter to Horizon Airways. I want them to know how Clara's actions made me feel. It's important for people to know when they're not being treated with kindness." Marcus felt a wave of pride. Here was his daughter, handling injustice not with anger or retaliation, but with words, with grace. "That's my girl," he said, smiling. "You have a powerful voice, and it's worth using." For the remainder of the flight, Leila poured her heart into the letter. She wrote about how Clara had made her feel unwelcome and disrespected, how it had taken away from what was supposed to be an exciting trip with her father. But she didn't stop there. She also wrote about the values of kindness and respect, the very values her father had instilled within Horizon Airways. When they landed in New York, Leila had finished her letter. It was neatly folded in her lap, ready to be sent. As they exited the plane, Marcus's mind was already racing with thoughts. This wasn't just about Clara. It was about the entire culture within his company. How had this gone unnoticed? He had built Horizon Airways with the belief that every passenger should feel valued. Yet here was an example of his own employees failing to uphold that vision. And now, because of his daughter, he had no choice but to take action. The letter that shook an empire. A silent force awakens. The morning sun rose over the New York skyline, casting golden hues over the towering skyscrapers. Lila sat by the hotel window, staring at her letter. She had written every word with care, pouring her heart into the experience of what had happened aboard the flight. But now, as she prepared to send it off, a small seed of doubt crept into her mind. Would anyone actually read it? Would it make a difference? Marcus, seated across the room in a leather chair, watched his daughter in silence. He knew that this moment mattered, not just for Leila, but for Horizon Airways as a whole. Her words had power. They had the ability to shine a light on something hidden beneath the surface, something he now realized had been festering for far too long. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice warm but firm. Leila turned to him, holding the neatly folded letter in her hands. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her eyes held the same determined spark he had always admired. "Yes," she nodded. "I want to make sure no one else ever feels the way I did on that flight." Marcus smiled. "Then let's make sure your voice is heard." Together, they made their way down to the hotel lobby, where Leila personally handed the letter to the concierge. It was addressed to Horizon Airways customer relations, but what she didn't know was that Marcus had already put things in motion behind the scenes. As they stepped out onto the bustling streets of New York, Marcus felt something shift within him. He had always been a man of action, and this situation would be no different. It was time to investigate what was really going on inside Horizon Airways. Behind the scenes, a problem uncovered. Back at Horizon Airways Atlanta headquarters, Marcus's vice president of human resources, Daniel Tran, sat in his office, reviewing files. His screen was flooded with passenger feedback reports, most of them routine complaints about baggage delays, occasional flight cancellations, and the usual requests for better in-flight service. But after Marcus's call, Daniel had begun searching for something deeper: patterns, repeat offenders, any signs that the airline's customer-first philosophy was starting to crack. And what he found shocked him: a hidden pattern of neglect. As Daniel filtered through incident reports, a particular name kept popping up: Clara Madison. Over the past year alone, Clara had been the subject of over a dozen complaints from passengers. Most were subtle, claims that she had been cold or unhelpful. Others were more concerning. Passengers feeling belittled, children being ignored, elderly travelers receiving little assistance. But the worst report of all came from a widow in her 70s who had struggled to place her bag in the overhead compartment. The flight attendant barely acknowledged me. I asked for assistance, but she just sighed and told me to ask another passenger. I've flown Horizon for years, but I never expected to feel invisible like this. Daniel immediately forwarded the findings to Marcus. Marcus's next move. Marcus received the report late that evening, just as he and Leela were winding down after a long day in New York. He read every line carefully, his expression darkening with each new detail. This wasn't just about one incident. This was systemic. It wasn't just Clara. There were several flight attendants with repeated complaints against them. Some had simply grown jaded over time. Others, like Clara, had become downright dismissive of passengers. Marcus knew he had built Horizon Airways to be a beacon of kindness and service, but somewhere along the way, some of his employees had forgotten that mission. That night, as Leela drifted off to sleep, Marcus sat at his laptop, drafting an email to his executive board. Subject: Company-wide audit and culture reform initiative. Urgency: high. Effective immediately, I am launching a full-scale review of Horizon Airways' internal service culture. Recent incidents have highlighted an unacceptable decline in the values that define us. I am personally overseeing this effort to ensure that our employees understand what Horizon stands for: respect, dignity, and a commitment to treating every passenger like family. To begin this process, I am calling for an emergency leadership summit in Atlanta. All department heads must be present. We will discuss the findings and create a roadmap for a company-wide transformation. There will be no exceptions. Horizon Airways will not become just another airline. We will lead by example. We will be the airline that people trust, not just for our flights, but for the way we treat them. This starts now. Marcus Johnson, CEO, Horizon Airways. The boardroom confrontation. 3 days later, Horizon Airways senior executives gathered in Atlanta for the emergency meeting. The tension in the air was palpable. Some had heard whispers of what was coming, but most had no idea just how serious it was. Marcus stood at the front of the room, his hands clasped before him. The room was full: heads of operations, customer service, human resources, flight management, and even senior flight attendants. Clara Madison sat among them. She had no idea that the meeting was about her. The conference room lights dimmed as Marcus stepped forward and clicked on the projector. One by one, he displayed passenger complaints, each one detailing moments where passengers had felt disrespected, unheard, or mistreated by Horizon employees. A cold silence settled over the room. These, Marcus said, his voice level but sharp, are real experiences from our passengers. And they are unacceptable. Some executives shifted uncomfortably. Others, like Daniel Tran, nodded in agreement. Marcus turned to face the room fully. I built this airline from the ground up with one goal: to create an experience where people felt valued. Every single passenger that steps onto our planes is trusting us, not just with their time, but with their comfort, their emotions, and in some cases, their dignity. And right now, we are failing them. A ripple of unease passed through the room. This isn't just about policies or procedures. This is about people. It's about culture. And if we don't fix it now, then we are no better than any other soulless airline out there. Marcus's eyes flickered to Clara, who sat stiffly in her chair, her face unreadable. We are implementing mandatory empathy training for every single employee in this company, from the CEO down to the newest flight attendant. And let me be clear, anyone who refuses to embrace these values will not have a place at Horizon Airways. Murmurs erupted around the table. Marcus, surely we don't need to be that drastic, one executive started. Drastic. Marcus cut him off. The only thing drastic here is that it's taken us this long to see the problem. Silence. Then, a voice from the back. It was Clara. "With all due respect, Mr. Johnson," she said stiffly, "passengers complain about everything. Some are just too sensitive. If we catered to everyone's feelings, we'd never get anything done." Marcus locked eyes with her. "Clara," he said, his tone deadly calm, "do you know who wrote the letter that started all of this?" Clara frowned. "No." Marcus folded his hands together. "My daughter. She was on your flight." Clara paled. For the first time, the weight of what she had done crashed down on her like a tidal wave. A hush fell over the room. "This isn't just about one flight, Clara. This is about every single person you've made feel invisible." She had no response. Marcus straightened. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is where Horizon changes. We move forward or we fall behind. The choice is ours." The meeting ended in silence. But Horizon Airways would never be the same again. The flight that changed everything. Fallout from the boardroom. The executive summit at Horizon Airways headquarters had ended in dead silence, but the impact of Marcus Johnson's words still lingered in the minds of every senior officer who attended. That meeting was not just another corporate briefing. It was a wake-up call. For too long, employees like Clara Madison had operated under the belief that customer service was a matter of efficiency, not empathy. That passengers were numbers, not people. But Marcus had shattered that illusion, making it crystal clear that Horizon Airways would no longer tolerate cold, transactional service. And now, the airline industry was watching. The next morning, as the New York sun rose over Marcus and Leila's hotel room, his phone was already buzzing. News had leaked. Leila's letter goes viral. It started as an internal memo within Horizon Airways, an acknowledgement of Marcus's plan for cultural reform. But within hours, a copy of Leila's letter had made its way online. A junior employee in customer relations, moved by her words, had anonymously shared a portion of it on social media. And just like that, the internet exploded. #KindnessStakeSlight began trending worldwide. People from all corners of the internet, frequent travelers, airline employees, and everyday individuals, shared their own experiences of being ignored, mistreated, or belittled while flying. And then something incredible happened. People who had once flown Horizon Airways began flooding social media with their positive experiences too. Stories of flight attendants who had gone the extra mile, of pilots who had reassured nervous flyers, of ground crew members who had brightened a traveler's day with small acts of kindness. Horizon Airways wasn't just trending, it was making history. Marcus, still in his hotel suite, watched in awe as thousands of messages poured in. Then his phone rang. Daniel Tran, his VP of HR. "Marcus," Daniel's voice was breathless. "The letter, it's everywhere. And I don't even know how to say this." Marcus's heart pounded. "What is it?" "The FAA just called," Daniel said. "They want to meet with you. They think what we're doing could set a new industry standard." Marcus exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of the table. This was bigger than he had ever imagined. Clara faces the consequences. Meanwhile, at Horizon's Atlanta headquarters, Clara Madison sat in a small conference room, awaiting a private meeting with Marcus and Daniel. For the first time in her career, she felt nervous. She had been called out, in front of the entire leadership team. And now she had to face the consequences. When Marcus entered, he wasn't angry. He wasn't there to scold or humiliate her. He was there to give her a choice. "Clara," Marcus began, setting down a folder. "I've reviewed your file. You've been with Horizon for 10 years. And yet, in the last 3 years alone, you've accumulated more passenger complaints than anyone else on our senior crew." Clara swallowed but said nothing. Marcus leaned forward. "I need to understand. What changed? You weren't always this way." For the first time, Clara's tough demeanor cracked. She looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. I got tired. Marcus frowned. "I've been in this job for a long time," Clara continued, shaking her head. "I used to care, but over the years, it felt like no one appreciated what we did. Passengers complain about the smallest things. They treat us like servants. I stopped seeing them as people. And I guess I stopped seeing myself as one too." A long silence stretched between them. Marcus sighed. "I get it. Burnout is real. And I won't pretend that customer service is always easy. But Clara, you let that exhaustion turn into resentment. And that resentment has hurt people." Clara lowered her head. "You have a choice," Marcus said, his tone softer now. "You can leave Horizon Airways, or you can stay and commit to changing. But if you stay, you're going to have to earn back every ounce of trust you lost." Clara looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. No CEO had ever spoken to her like this before. No one had ever asked her why. She had spent years burying her exhaustion under layers of indifference. But now Marcus had seen right through her. "I want to stay," she whispered. Marcus nodded. "Then you'll start with our new empathy program. You're going back to training. And when you return, you're going to work with our most compassionate crew members. You're going to learn what it means to serve with heart again." Clara inhaled deeply. "Thank you for giving me a chance." Marcus stood. "Thank my daughter," he said. "She's the reason we're doing this." FAA steps in, a new industry standard. A week later, Marcus sat across from a table of FAA officials and industry leaders, outlining his boldest proposal yet. "Air travel is one of the most intimate services in the world," Marcus began. "People aren't just buying tickets. They're putting their safety, comfort, and emotions in our hands. But somewhere along the way, the human aspect of flying got lost." The officials nodded. "I want to change that. And not just for Horizon Airways. For the entire industry." A murmur of intrigue spread through the room. Marcus took a deep breath. "I want to implement the first ever empathy certification for airlines. A program that ensures every flight attendant, every pilot, every crew member is trained, not just in safety and protocol, but in compassion, patience, and understanding." One of the FAA representatives leaned forward. "You're talking about a federal standard?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, because empathy in aviation shouldn't be optional. It should be expected." The room fell into stunned silence. Then the head of the FAA smiled. "Mr. Johnson, you may be onto something." Passengers rallied behind Horizon. As news of Marcus's initiative spread, passengers worldwide responded with overwhelming support. Major corporations announced plans to collaborate with Horizon Airways to improve customer service within their own companies. Airline competitors scrambled to adapt, fearing that if they didn't follow Horizon's lead, they would be left behind. Frequent flyers vowed to only book with Horizon, supporting Marcus's vision for a new, more compassionate era of travel. And at the heart of it all, Leela watched in awe. She had written one letter, and it had changed everything. A personal moment. Marcus and Leela. Later that night, Marcus found Leela sitting by the fireplace at their home in Atlanta, holding a letter in her hands. He sat beside her. "What's that?" he asked. Leela handed it to him. "It's another letter. For Horizon." Marcus raised a brow. "Did something happen?" Leela shook her head, smiling softly. "No, I just realized that kindness isn't something we fix once. It's something we have to choose. Every day, over and over again." Marcus exhaled, a deep pride swelling in his chest. "Then let's make sure we keep choosing it." Together, they sealed the letter, a new beginning for Horizon Airways. And as Marcus held his daughter's hand, he knew that this was only the beginning. The transformation of Horizon Airways. A new dawn for Horizon Airways. It had been 3 months since Leila's letter first shook the foundations of Horizon Airways, igniting a movement that reached far beyond the airline industry. The company had undergone a massive transformation. New empathy-based training programs had been rolled out for all employees, from executives to flight attendants to customer service teams. A revolutionary passenger experience initiative had begun, ensuring every traveler felt valued and respected. The FAA had officially approved Marcus's empathy certification proposal, setting a precedent for the entire airline industry. But none of these changes came without resistance. Inside Horizon Airways, some employees struggled to adapt to this new culture shift. Many had spent years prioritizing efficiency over emotional connection. For some, it was an easy transition. For others, it felt impossible. And at the heart of it all was Clara Madison, the flight attendant whose mistreatment of Leela had triggered the movement. Clara's redemption arc begins. After her meeting with Marcus, Clara had been placed on leave, forced to attend mandatory empathy training before she was allowed to return to work. She had spent years in the airline industry, believing that kindness was a luxury, not a necessity. In her mind, her job had been about getting passengers from point A to point B, nothing more. But as she sat through the first few days of empathy training, something within her began to shift. She listened to passengers recount their worst travel experiences, stories of being ignored, belittled, dismissed, stories that sounded too familiar. Then, on the third day of training, she was shown a video. It was Leela's speech at her school, the one she had given after her letter went viral. I think sometimes people don't realize how much their actions can affect others. Maybe if they did, they would choose to be kinder. Clara froze. For the first time, she truly saw the impact of what she had done. Leela hadn't written her letter out of anger or spite. She had written it because she had been hurt, and it was Clara's actions that had caused it. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, replaying all the moments she had been dismissive, impatient, or outright rude to passengers. How many Leelas had she ignored? By the time she returned for her final week of training, she wasn't just there because she had to be. She was there because she wanted to change. A test of character. After completing her training, Clara was reinstated, but with conditions. Marcus personally assigned her to a mentorship program where she would shadow one of the airline's best and most compassionate flight attendants, Hannah Carter. Hannah was everything Clara wasn't: gentle, patient, and deeply empathetic. At first, Clara resisted Hannah's methods. Why did she spend so much time talking to passengers? Why did she go out of her way to help nervous flyers? Why did she take the time to comfort families traveling with children? To Clara, these things seemed unnecessary. But then, everything changed. One evening, on a long-haul flight from New York to London, Clara witnessed a moment that shattered her entire worldview. A young mother, traveling alone with a crying infant, was struggling. She looked exhausted, on the verge of tears. Instead of brushing her off, Hannah knelt beside her. "Hey there, Mama. It looks like you've had a long day. Let me help you." Hannah offered to hold the baby, allowing the mother to breathe for just a moment. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. You don't know how much this means to me." At that moment, Clara felt something break inside her. For years, she had ignored these moments. She had chosen efficiency over compassion. But now, seeing Hannah's kindness in action, she finally understood. This is what flying is supposed to feel like. When they landed in London, Clara made a life-changing decision. She walked up to Marcus's office on her own. "I want to do more," she told him. "I don't just want to change. I want to help others change too." Marcus nodded, a knowing smile on his face. "Then you're in the perfect place to start." Horizon Airways goes global. While Clara worked on her personal transformation, Horizon Airways was expanding its reach like never before. After months of negotiations, Marcus had finalized Horizon's first major international partnership. Horizon Airways was officially joining forces with several leading global airlines, ensuring that their empathy-based training model would be shared across the industry. And at the heart of the initiative was the Kindness Passport. Every passenger who flew Horizon now received a small booklet, a Kindness Passport, where they could write down acts of kindness they experienced during their travels. Within weeks, social media flooded with images of full passports, filled with beautiful handwritten notes from passengers all over the world. Horizon wasn't just an airline anymore. It was a movement, a shocking threat to Horizon's future. But not everyone was happy with Horizon's rise. Several competing airlines had started to see their profits dwindle. They viewed Horizon's radical shift toward kindness and empathy as a threat, a disruption to the industry's traditional model. One airline in particular, Titan Air, a ruthless budget carrier known for its aggressive pricing and minimal customer service, saw Horizon as its biggest competitor. And they were planning something big. One evening, as Marcus sat in his office reviewing Horizon's latest performance reports, his phone buzzed. It was Daniel Tran. "Marcus," Daniel's voice was urgent. "We have a problem." Marcus sat up, his stomach tightening. "What kind of problem?" Daniel hesitated, then spoke. "Titan Air just launched a smear campaign against us. They're calling our new customer service model a waste of resources. They're running ads saying we're focused on feelings, not flying, that we're prioritizing emotions over efficiency." Marcus felt his blood boil. Titan Air was mocking everything he had built. But then Daniel said something even worse. "And they're trying to poach our senior employees. They're offering them double the salary to leave Horizon." A cold silence filled the room. Marcus leaned forward, his mind racing. Titan Air was trying to destroy them, not just with words, but by stealing the very people who made Horizon special. For the first time since this journey began, Marcus felt truly threatened. Horizon was winning the hearts of passengers, but now they were at war with the industry itself. And Marcus had to find a way to fight back, before everything he had built was ripped away. The battle for Horizon Airways. Titan Air strikes first. Marcus stared at his phone, his mind racing. Titan Air's smear campaign was already circulating across the industry. They mocked Horizon Airways for prioritizing feelings over efficiency. They ran aggressive ads, painting Horizon as soft and impractical. They targeted business travelers, pushing the narrative that Horizon was wasting resources on pointless programs. And worst of all, they were coming for his employees. Titan Air had begun offering double salaries to Horizon's top flight attendants, pilots, and customer service staff. Marcus clenched his fists. This wasn't just competition. This was war. Employees face a tough choice. Back at Horizon Airways headquarters, the atmosphere was tense. Employees who had once been proud of their airline's culture now felt conflicted. The offers from Titan Air were tempting, especially for those who had families to support. Double the salary for doing less work. Sounds like a dream. I love Horizon, but at the end of the day, money is money. What if Marcus's changes don't last? What if this whole kindness thing falls apart? Doubt began to creep into the workforce, and Marcus felt the weight of it. Would people stay loyal to his vision, or would they chase the higher paycheck? The loyalty test. One morning, Marcus called a full company meeting. The employees gathered in the largest conference hall at Horizon's headquarters. Some looked uneasy, others looked hopeful. Marcus took the stage. He looked out at the crowd, hundreds of people who had helped build Horizon from the ground up. And now many of them were considering leaving. He took a deep breath. "I know what's happening," he began. "I know Titan Air is making offers." The room went dead silent. Marcus nodded, acknowledging the truth. "I'm not going to stand here and pretend that money doesn't matter. We all have responsibilities, families, futures to think about. And I won't blame a single one of you for making the choice that's best for you." A murmur ran through the crowd. Then Marcus's voice hardened. "But if you stay, if you choose Horizon, know this: you're choosing something bigger than just a paycheck." He looked around, locking eyes with Clara, Daniel, Hannah, and dozens of others. "You're choosing to be part of something that matters. You're choosing to set a new standard for this industry. You're choosing to change the way people experience air travel, not just today, but for the future." The room stilled. Marcus took a step forward. Titan Air thinks kindness is weakness. They think empathy has no place in business. They believe that if they throw money at you, you'll abandon everything we've built. His voice rose. So here's my challenge to you. Prove them wrong. A wave of emotion rippled through the crowd. Some employees teared up. Others nodded, their expressions hardening with determination. Then one voice broke the silence. I'm staying. It was Hannah Carter, the flight attendant Clara had shadowed during her training. Another voice joined in. I'm staying too. Then another. I'm with you, Marcus. One by one, hands went up across the room. Until nearly everyone in the hall stood up in solidarity. Horizon Airways was not going down without a fight. Clara's moment of truth. In the days that followed, Titan Air's efforts to poach Horizon's employees began to crumble. Many had been tempted, but Marcus's speech had reminded them why they had joined Horizon in the first place. Yet, one employee still hadn't decided. Clara Madison. She had completed her empathy training. She had begun to see the value of kindness in air travel. But Titan Air's offer was tempting. She had been in the industry for over a decade. She had seen how brutal airline work could be. And double the salary. It was hard to ignore. One evening, she sat in her apartment, staring at two contracts. One from Horizon Airways, one from Titan Air. A knock on the door startled her. She opened it to find Hannah Carter standing there. You leaving? Hannah asked, crossing her arms. Clara sighed. I don't know. It's a lot of money, Hannah. Hannah stepped inside. Let me ask you something, Clara. Would you rather have money or purpose? Clara hesitated. I want both. Hannah smiled. Then stay. Because I promise you, what we're doing at Horizon, it's bigger than a paycheck. Clara exhaled. You really believe that? Hannah nodded. I do. And you do too. That's why you're struggling with this decision. Clara bit her lip. Then, without a word, she reached over and ripped the Titan Air contract in half. She had made her choice. Horizon was where she belonged. Leela takes the stage. Meanwhile, Marcus was preparing for the biggest moment of Horizon's fight against Titan Air. The International Aviation Summit was being held in Washington, D.C., where top airline CEOs and aviation officials would gather. Titan Air's CEO, Gerald Langley, was expected to double down on his attacks against Horizon Airways. Marcus knew he had to send a message, and he knew exactly who should deliver it. Leela. At first, she hesitated. Dad, I'm just a kid. Why would they listen to me? Marcus smiled. Because you started this movement, and because your voice is more powerful than you think. So on the day of the summit, Leela Johnson stood on a stage in front of the world's top aviation executives. She took a deep breath. Then she spoke. When I wrote my letter, I wasn't trying to change an airline. I was just a kid who felt invisible. The room fell silent. I wrote that letter because I wanted people to remember that kindness matters. That how we treat each other matters. And now, because of that letter, Horizon Airways is proving that business doesn't have to be cold. That service can still have heart. The audience leaned in, captivated. Then she looked directly at Titan Air's CEO. Mr. Langley, you think kindness makes us weak. It doesn't. It makes us strong. Because people don't just want cheap flights. They want to feel valued. They want to know they matter. The room erupted in applause. Titan Air's smear campaign. Destroyed. Horizon's reputation. Stronger than ever. And Leela. She had just become the voice of an industry-wide revolution. A final blow to Titan Air. Days later, Titan Air's reputation crumbled. Passengers began boycotting them, flooding social media with complaints about their cold, indifferent service. Meanwhile, Horizon Airways bookings skyrocketed. Marcus's company wasn't just winning. They were leading a new era of air travel. The fall of Titan Air and the rise of a new era. A new dawn for Horizon Airways. In the weeks following Leela's powerful speech at the International Aviation Summit, Horizon Airways experienced an unprecedented surge in popularity. Passenger bookings skyrocketed, with travelers specifically choosing Horizon over competitors. Business travelers, once hesitant about Horizon's kindness-based approach, began advocating for it, citing the airline's stress-free experience as a major advantage. Major media outlets hailed Marcus and Leela as revolutionizing the airline industry. Meanwhile, Titan Air was unraveling. Their smear campaign had backfired spectacularly. The internet was flooded with stories of their poor customer service, hidden fees, and dismissive employees. The narrative had flipped. People now saw Titan Air as the cold, heartless corporation, while Horizon represented a future where customers mattered. And then, the final blow landed. Titan Air's scandalous downfall. 2 weeks after the summit, a whistleblower from Titan Air leaked confidential documents to the press. The documents exposed a shocking truth. Titan Air had deliberately underpaid their employees for years, forcing flight attendants to work unpaid overtime. They had ignored thousands of customer complaints, actively covering up bad press. They had been secretly cutting safety inspections to increase profits. The revelation hit the industry like an earthquake. Within 24 hours, Titan Air's stock plummeted by 45%. Within 72 hours, federal aviation authorities launched an investigation. Within 1 week, multiple lawsuits had been filed against the company. Passengers canceled their bookings in droves. By the end of the month, Titan Air had lost over 60% of its market share. And at the heart of it all, Horizon Airways was rising higher than ever. Marcus's boldest move yet. With Titan Air in freefall, major investors from around the world began reaching out to Marcus. Many saw Horizon as the new leader in global aviation, and they wanted in on the future. Marcus had a choice to make. He could play it safe, continue expanding Horizon slowly, and focus on steady growth. Or he could take a massive risk. He could buy out Titan Air. The idea was radical. Titan Air was a massive airline, even with its problems. Acquiring it would double Horizon's fleet, open hundreds of new routes, and instantly make them a global powerhouse. But it was also dangerous. Titan Air's reputation was in the gutter. If Marcus took over, he would have to rebuild everything from scratch. For days, he debated the decision, until one evening, he sat with Leela on the balcony of their home in Atlanta, looking at the night sky. Leela turned to him. "What's wrong, Dad?" Marcus sighed. "I have a chance to buy Titan Air." Leela's eyes widened. "That's huge. Are you going to do it?" Marcus hesitated. "I don't know. It's risky." Leela thought for a moment. Then she said something that changed everything. "When you started Horizon, didn't people say it was too risky too?" Marcus looked at her, and he realized she was right. Every great decision he had made was a risk, but he had never backed down before, and he wasn't going to start now. Horizon Airways acquires Titan Air. The next morning, Marcus made the call. Within 2 weeks, the deal was finalized. Horizon Airways had officially acquired Titan Air, taking control of their entire fleet, their airport slots, and their international routes. But Marcus wasn't just buying Titan Air. He was dismantling it. Every toxic executive was fired. Every policy built around greed and exploitation was erased. Titan Air's aggressive corporate branding was scrapped entirely, and in its place, Marcus announced a historic rebranding. Titan Air was no more. Horizon Global was born. The first flight of Horizon Global. 3 months later, Horizon Global's first flight took off. A massive, upgraded supercarrier bound for Tokyo. It was the largest flight Horizon had ever operated. And on board, Leela and Marcus sat together, watching history unfold. Leela looked around at the new crew members, many of whom had come from Titan Air. They had undergone Horizon's intensive empathy training, and now they greeted passengers with warmth and kindness. Leela turned to her father. "Dad, you did it." Marcus smiled. "No, sweetheart, we did it." The flight took off. Horizon Global wasn't just an airline anymore. It was a revolution. And this was just the beginning. The legacy of Horizon Airways. The future takes flight. 5 years had passed since Horizon Airways acquired Titan Air and rebranded into Horizon Global. What had once been a regional airline competing against industry giants was now the undisputed leader in global aviation. But Marcus Johnson wasn't done yet. Because now, Horizon Global wasn't just an airline. It was an empire, and it was about to change the future of transportation forever. Horizon's boldest expansion yet. Space travel. The airline industry had always been bound to the Earth. But Marcus had a different vision. He wanted Horizon Global to be the first airline to break the boundaries of gravity itself. Commercial space travel. For years, companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and NASA had been developing space tourism programs, but none had yet created a seamless, affordable way for everyday travelers to experience space. Marcus wanted Horizon Global to be the first commercial airline to do it right. He called it Horizon Stellar, a fleet of luxury suborbital spaceplanes designed to carry passengers into low Earth orbit, allowing them to experience zero gravity, breathtaking planetary views, and a smooth return to Earth, all with the same level of care, safety, and hospitality that Horizon Global was known for. It was a risk, a challenge, a gamble that could either revolutionize travel or end in disaster. But Marcus had spent his entire career taking risks, and he wasn't stopping now. Leela steps into leadership. By now, Leela Johnson was no longer the shy 12-year-old who had written a letter to her father's airline. She was 22 years old, a rising force in the company, and had just graduated from MIT with a double degree in aerospace engineering and business leadership. She wasn't just following in her father's footsteps. She was surpassing them. Since finishing her studies, Leela had taken an active role in Horizon Global's leadership, especially in the Horizon Stellar division. She worked closely with engineers, pilots, and scientists to design the world's first passenger-friendly spaceplanes. She wasn't just an executive. She was an innovator, and people noticed. The media called her the Heiress of the Sky, the young woman destined to lead Horizon into the future. But behind the scenes, Marcus watched his daughter with a quiet realization. She was ready, more ready than he had ever been at her age. And soon, he would have to let go. The most difficult decision of Marcus's life. One evening, Marcus sat alone in his office, staring out over the Atlanta skyline. The company was thriving. Horizon Global was now the most trusted name in aviation, leading the world in luxury air travel, humanitarian flights, and cutting-edge aerospace innovation. But something inside him felt different. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt tired. Not in a bad way, but in the way a man feels after building something bigger than himself. He looked down at a document sitting on his desk, a resignation letter. He wasn't just thinking about retiring. He was ready to pass the torch. And he knew exactly who the next CEO should be. The final flight of Marcus Johnson. The next morning, Marcus called a private meeting with Leela. She sat across from him, her sharp mind already analyzing his expression. "You're thinking about something big," she said. Marcus chuckled. "When did you get so good at reading me?" Leela smiled. "I've been watching you my whole life." Marcus took a deep breath. "Leela, I'm stepping down." Her smile faded. "Wait. What?" "It's time," Marcus said. "I've built this company as far as I can take it. But you're the future." Leela stared at him, her mind spinning. CEO. It was too soon, wasn't it? "Dad, Marcus raised a hand, stopping her. "You're ready." Leela exhaled. She had spent her whole life learning from him, watching him turn Horizon from a dream into an empire. And now, it was her turn. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "Okay." Marcus smiled. And just like that, the next chapter of Horizon Global had begun. Horizon's first spaceflight. 2 months later, the world watched in awe as Horizon Stellar launched its first ever passenger spaceflight. The specially designed Horizon Stellar spaceplane carried 6 passengers, including Leela and Marcus, into suborbital space. For the first time, civilians, not just astronauts, experienced the stars like never before. They floated in zero gravity. They looked down at the Earth's breathtaking curvature. And for a few moments, they were infinite. When they landed safely back on Earth, Horizon Stellar became the most in-demand space travel program in history. And standing at the head of it all was Leela. The final scene. A legacy in the sky. One evening, Marcus and Leela stood on the observation deck of Horizon Global's headquarters, watching the sun set over the city. Leela had officially been CEO for 6 months now. Marcus had retired from day-to-day leadership, but he still acted as an advisor when needed. He looked over at his daughter, confident, strong, and fearless. She was leading Horizon into a future he had never even dreamed of. And he couldn't have been prouder. "You know," he said, "I built Horizon to change the airline industry. But you're changing the future of travel itself." Leela smiled. "I had a good teacher." The two of them stood in silence, watching as a Horizon Global jet soared through the evening sky. The airline they had built together. A company that had started with one letter from a 12-year-old girl. And now it was leading humanity to the stars. As the first Horizon Stellar spaceplane prepared for its next mission, Marcus took a deep breath. This wasn't just his legacy anymore. It was Leela's. And she was just getting started. The end of one era. The beginning of another. Epilogue. Horizon's future. Horizon Stellar expands to Mars travel. Leela becomes one of the most influential leaders in aerospace history. Marcus writes a best-selling memoir about the journey of Horizon Airways. A new generation of dreamers, pilots, and explorers rise, ready to carry the torch. The story of Horizon Airways had ended. But the story of humanity's journey beyond the skies had only just begun.